During the pregnancy, the maid had an accident, and the millionaire realized he did not want to lose her. The deafening sound of the ambulance cut through the freezing Boston air as Andrew Harrison squeezed the inert hand of Emma Collins, his executive assistant. The red and blue lights painted unsettling shadows inside the vehicle, and the paramedic worked quickly to stabilize her vital signs. Andrew could still hear the sound of twisting metal and the desperate cries of witnesses to the accident. "Sir, we need to know, the patient is how many months pregnant?" the paramedic asked, adjusting the heart monitor. The question hit Andrew like a punch in the gut. 3 months. Emma was 3 months pregnant, and he was the father, a secret they had both carefully kept after a single night of vulnerability during a business trip to Chicago. 3 months, he replied in a choked voice, feeling the weight of guilt compress his chest. Massachusetts General Hospital loomed ahead, its lights shining like a beacon of hope in the cold January night. Andrew watched helplessly as the medical team rushed Emma to the emergency room, leaving him alone with his turbulent thoughts in the aseptic corridor. "Mr. Harrison?" a middle-aged nurse approached. "I need the patient's details for admission." As she provided the information, Andrew relived the last few months. Emma had dealt with the pregnancy on her own, maintaining an impeccable professional attitude at the Harrison Enterprises office. He had offered discreet financial support, which she had politely refused. Now, watching her fight for her life, he realized how much time he had wasted hiding behind social conventions and family expectations. His phone vibrated. It was his mother, Victoria Harrison, probably replying to the brief message he had sent about the accident. The matriarch of the Harrison family was known for her influence in Boston high society and her uncompromising views on tradition and social standing. "Andrew, dear, I heard about the accident with your assistant. What a tragedy, but you shouldn't be in hospital at this hour. We have dinner with the Montgomerys tomorrow, and you know how important it is for business." "Mom," Andrew interrupted, his voice firm, "Emma is pregnant, and the baby is mine." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "I'll call you back," he finished, hanging up before his mother could answer. Dr. Rebecca Chun, the doctor in charge of the case, approached with a serious expression. "Mr. Harrison, we've managed to stabilize Ms. Collins, but the next 24 hours will be crucial. She has suffered considerable trauma, but we are closely monitoring both her and the fetus." Andrew ran his hands through his dark hair, an anxious gesture that had become frequent in recent months. "Can I see her? For a few minutes?" She sedated, "But I think your presence could help." In the ICU room, the rhythmic sound of heart monitors filled the room. Emma looked small and fragile among the tubes and devices. Her face, normally lively and expressive during company meetings, was pale and bruised. Andrew sat down next to her, gently taking her hand. "I'm sorry, Emma," he whispered, "for not being the man you and our son deserve." Memories of that night in Chicago flooded his mind. The conference they had attended, the late dinner discussing business strategies, the rain that had forced them to share a cab, the vulnerability in her eyes when she confessed that she felt lonely in the big city, the moment their lips met, the passion they had both repressed for so long. Andrew had always admired Emma's intelligence and dedication. In 3 years as his executive assistant, she had transformed the chaos of his schedule into a well-orchestrated symphony. But he had kept his distance, aware of his family's expectations and the company's advice on relationships in the workplace. The accident changed everything. Driving home from a late meeting, Emma was hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light. The news reached Andrew via a call from the hospital. He was still listed as an emergency contact in the company documents. "Mr. Harrison?" A different nurse entered the room. "There are suppressed people in the lobby. Apparently, someone leaked the information about the accident." Andrew clenched his fists. He knew it would only be a matter of time before the story came out. The heir to Harrison Enterprises, one of the largest technology conglomerates in the country, expecting a child with his assistant was not the kind of news that went unnoticed. "I'll deal with it," he replied, getting up reluctantly. Before leaving, he leaned over and gently kissed Emma's forehead. "I'll be back soon, I promise." In the hallway, he met Richard Matthews, his lawyer and longtime friend, who had arrived after receiving his message. The journalists are already speculating, Richard informed her, showing her the notifications on his cell phone. We need a strategy. The only strategy one care about right now is making sure Emma and the baby are okay. Andrew replied, his voice laden with determination. As for the rest, it's time to stop hiding. Richard studied his friend for a moment. Your mother won't accept that easily. You know, Victoria, I'm not 16 anymore, Rich. I can't let her expectations dictate my life anymore. Andrew looked through Emma's bedroom window. I almost lost her today. I almost lost our son. Some things are more important than the Harrison name. The lawyer nodded, recognizing the change in his friend. I'll prepare an official statement and deal with the press. You take it. As Richard walked away, Andrew went back to his room. It was going to be a long night, but for the first time in months, he felt at peace with his choices. The fear of scandal, family disapproval, and professional consequences seemed insignificant compared to the fear of losing Emma and his son. Sitting next to her, Andrew began to plan the necessary changes. He knew the road would be difficult, but he was ready to fight, not just for the survival of Emma and the baby, but for the chance to build the family he had always secretly longed for, but never had the courage to pursue. Victoria Harrison burst into the hospital corridor with the same imposing presence that used to intimidate executives at board meetings. Her Chanel Degree 5 left a trail in the sterile air, while her heels echoed against the linoleum floor. Andrew saw her before she even met him, and his body instantly tensed. We need to talk, she declared, her voice controlled but charged with indignation. In private, Andrew cast one last glance at Emma through the bedroom window and followed his mother into an empty waiting room. Victoria closed the door and turned to face him, her blue eyes, the same ones he had inherited, shining with a mixture of disappointment and calculated concern. How could you be so irresponsible? She began, keeping her voice low but sharp. A son with your assistant? The Montgomerys have a perfectly suitable daughter. Stop it, Andrew interrupted, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. Emma is not a mistake that needs to be corrected. She's the most capable and upstanding person I've ever met. She's your employee, Andrew. Do you have any idea of the scandal this will cause? The company's shares have already dropped 2 points since the news leaked. Is that what you're worried about? The shares? Andrew ran his hands over his face, exhausted. Emma is fighting for her life and my son's, and you're worried about the financial market? Victoria moved closer, softening her expression slightly. Darling, I know you feel responsible, but there are discreet ways of dealing with this. We can make sure she's well compensated. No, the word burst out of him with a force that made his mother recoil. I'm not going to turn my child into a financial settlement. Emma isn't an employee who needs to be bought. He hesitated, the realization hitting him like a wave. She's the woman I love. The silence that followed was heavy. Victoria studied her son as if seeing him for the first time. You're not thinking clearly, she finally said. When your father died, I promised him that I would protect the Harrison legacy. I won't let you destroy everything you worked for because of a reckless affair. Dad died 15 years ago, Mom, and I spent every day since trying to be the son you wanted, the CEO the company needed. But not this time. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Dr. Chen entered, his professional expression masking any reaction to the tension evident in the room. Mr. Harrison, Ms. Collins is showing signs of consciousness. I thought you'd like to know. Andrew moved towards the door, but Victoria grabbed his arm. Andrew, if you go out that door now, what? He turned, facing her. Are you going to disown me? Remove me from the company? Do whatever you have to, Mom, but I'm not going to abandon Emma and my son. Leaving Victoria stunned, he followed Dr. Chen into Emma's room. Her eyes were ajar, confused, searching for something, or someone, in the unfamiliar surroundings. Emma, Andrew approached, holding her hand gently. I'm here. She blinked a few times, focusing on his face. She tried to speak, but the oxygen tube made it difficult. Dr. Chen quickly assessed her vital signs. The saturation is good. We can remove the breathing aid, the doctor declared, carefully proceeding with the extubation. The baby, Emma whispered, her voice hoarse. It's fine, Andrew assured her, stroking her hair. You're both fine. Silent tears streamed down her face. I should have been more careful. It wasn't your fault, he said firmly. The other driver was drunk. You didn't do anything wrong. Emma closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. Your mother's here, isn't she? I heard her voice. Andrew hesitated, but decided to be honest. Yes, but don't worry about that now. You need to rest. Andrew. She opened her eyes again, her gaze surprisingly lucid. I don't want to cause problems for you or your family. If you need to get away… No, he interrupted her, leaning closer. Listen, Emma, I've spent the last 3 months trying to convince myself that I could keep my distance, just be a father behind the scenes. But when I got that call from the hospital, his voice faltered. I realized I was lying to myself. I can't lose you. I don't want to lose you. Emma studied him in silence, searching his face for something. You don't have to say that just because I'm in hospital. I'm not, he smiled softly. In fact, I think the hospital just made me admit what I've known for a long time. I love you, Emma Collins, and if you give me the chance, I want to do it right. The 3 of us, together. Before Emma could reply, a movement at the door caught her eye. Victoria was standing there, watching the scene with an indecipherable expression. For a tense moment, no one moved. Then, slowly, the Harrison matriarch entered the room. Miss Collins, she said, her voice controlled. I see you're awake. I'm relieved. Emma tried to sit up, but Andrew gently stopped her. Mrs. Harrison, please, Victoria held up a hand. Let me speak first. Clearly, I underestimated the nature of the situation. Although I still have my reservations, my son has made his position quite clear. And if there's one thing Harrison has never done, it's abandon his family. Andrew watched his mother in amazement, recognizing what those words represented. Not exactly a blessing, but a first step towards acceptance. Richard Matthews watched from the doorway of the hospital room as his legal team worked tirelessly in the corridor, managing the growing media attention on the Harrison case. Through the glass, he could see Andrew sitting next to Emma, who was sleeping peacefully after her first solid meal in days. The scene made him smile. In 20 years of friendship, he had never seen Andrew so genuinely at peace. Mr. Matthews, Claire Peterson, the newest member of his team, approached with a tablet. The board of Harrison Enterprises is demanding an emergency meeting for tomorrow morning. Of course they are, Richard sighed, adjusting his tie. Prepare the documents we discussed. And Claire, make sure the hospital security is reinforced. I don't want any paparazzi getting pictures of Ms. Collins. Inside the room, Andrew noticed movement in the corridor. Careful not to wake Emma, he got up and went out to talk to his friend. How are things outside, he asked, closing the door softly. The world is curious to meet the woman who won the heart of Boston's most sought-after bachelor, Richard replied, trying to keep his tone light. But we have a bigger problem. The council has called a meeting for tomorrow. Andrew leaned against the wall, exhausted. Let me guess. They're worried about the company's image? Among other things, Gregory Montgomery is particularly vocal about the situation. Of course he is. He's probably already planned the wedding between his daughter Charlotte and me down to the smallest detail, Andrew commented bitterly. A nurse hurried past, reminding them to keep their voices down. Richard led Andrew to a more private area. You're gonna have to face them, Drew. And this time, I can't soften the ground for you. Andrew nodded, remembering how many times Richard had mediated difficult situations between him and the council over the years. I don't want you to smooth it over. It's time for some changes at Harrison Enterprises. Mr. Harrison? Dr. Chin approached, interrupting the conversation. I've just received the latest test from Ms. Collins. If she continues to progress like this, we'll be able to transfer her to a regular room tomorrow. The news brought a genuine smile to Andrew's face. What about the baby? The fetal beats are strong and regular. Considering the trauma suffered, both mother and baby are recovering remarkably well. As the doctor walked away, Richard observed the transformation in his friend's countenance. You know, for years I tried to convince you to find something besides work to live for. Who knew that Emma Collins would be the one to make it happen? She's always been there, Rich, right in front of me. I was just too busy trying to be what everyone expected of me to notice. A movement in the bedroom caught their attention. Emma was waking up. Andrew immediately headed back, but Richard stopped him for a moment. "Drew, whatever happens tomorrow at the council, I'm on your side." Inside the bedroom, Emma was struggling to sit up. Andrew quickly adjusted the pillows to support her better. "How long did I sleep?" she asked, her voice still hoarse. "A couple of hours. How are you feeling?" "Like I've been run over," she tried to joke, but her weak smile betrayed her discomfort. Andrew held her hand, noticing how it felt smaller and more fragile against his own. "Dr. Chin says you can go to a regular room tomorrow." "Great. I hate ICUs." Emma hesitated before continuing. "Andrew, about what we talked about earlier, about us." "You don't have to say anything now," he interrupted gently. "You need to focus on recovery." "No, I need to say that," she insisted, her green eyes meeting his with determination. "I love you too. Probably since that conference in Seattle, when you spent all night redoing a presentation just because an intern had made a mistake in the graphics." Andrew laughed, remembering the episode. "You were angry with me for being too demanding." "I wasn't angry. I was impressed by how much you cared about doing things the right way, without humiliating anyone in the process." A comfortable silence settled between them, filled only by the soft sound of hard monitors. "There's a council meeting tomorrow," Andrew finally said. "They're not happy with the situation." Emma tensed visibly. "What's going to happen?" "Honestly, I don't know. But no matter what they decide, it won't change anything between us." He leaned down, kissing her forehead softly. "You and our son are my priority now. But the company, it's your family's legacy. The company will survive. And if it doesn't survive the way it is, maybe it's time to build something new. Something of our own." Emma studied him for a moment, as if trying to determine whether he really believed what he was saying. "Your mother seemed more receptive today." "Victoria Harrison doesn't change her mind easily," Andrew smiled. "But I think seeing you here, fighting for her grandson's life, touched something in her that I thought no longer existed." A soft knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Victoria entered carrying a small bag. "I brought you a few things you might need," she said, addressing Emma. "Toiletries. A more comfortable sweater than those awful ones from the hospital." Emma and Andrew exchanged surprised glances before she replied. "Thank you, Mrs. Harrison. That's very kind of you." "Victoria, please," the matriarch corrected, taking a seat in the armchair next to the bed. "And Andrew, you should go home and get some rest. You have an important meeting tomorrow." "Mom, I'll stay with her," Victoria assured her. "I promise not to start any wars while you're away." Victoria Harrison's surprisingly light comment drew a small smile from Emma. Andrew looked between the two women, realizing that maybe there was hope for his family after all. "I'll be back in a few hours," he promised, kissing Emma softly before leaving. In the hallway, he found Richard still working on his tablet. "Keep an eye on them," he asked his friend. "Always," Richard assured him. "Now go. Tomorrow will be a long day." The meeting room on the 42nd floor of Harrison Enterprises was buzzing with whispered conversations when Andrew entered at precisely 8 a.m. The 12 board members, all in their impeccable dark suits, fell silent immediately. Gregory Montgomery, executive vice president, was the first to speak up. "Andrew, we were hoping you'd have a little more consideration for the position you've put us in." His voice oozed disapproval. "The headlines are devastating." "Good morning to you too," Andrew replied, keeping his cool as he took his place at the head of the table. Richard Matthews sat discreetly in a corner, prepared to intervene if necessary. "This isn't a joke," Catherine Whitman, the only woman on the board apart from Victoria, leaned forward. "Our shares have fallen 5 points since yesterday. Investors are nervous. And I assume you all have a magic solution to propose?" Andrew asked, his voice carrying a note of defiance that surprised even his mother, sitting on the other side of the table. Gregory cleared his throat. "Actually, yes. We've prepared an official statement denying any romantic involvement between you and Ms. Collins. We can present her as a dedicated employee who you are generously helping after a tragic accident." "What about the baby?" Andrew asked, his voice dangerously controlled. "Generous financial compensation, relocation to another state, perhaps even another country," Gregory continued, as if discussing a simple business transaction. "All very discreetly, of course." Andrew let out a humorless laugh. Do you really think you can sweep my son under the carpet as if he were an accounting inconvenience? Your father built this company from scratch, interjected Harold Pierce, the longest-serving member of the board. He dedicated his life to creating a legacy that I should what? Protect by abandoning my own son? Andrew stood up, resting his hands on the table. My father died when I was 17, and since then, you've all taken turns telling me exactly how you would have wanted me to live my life. Well, I got news for you. He's not here, and I'm not him. Victoria Harrison watched her son with a complex expression, something between pride and concern. Anil, no, Mom, let me finish. He took a deep breath. In the last 10 years, I've transformed Harrison Enterprises from a traditional technology company into one of the leaders in sustainable innovation. We've tripled our market value, expanded to 3 continents, and created more than 10,000 jobs. I did all this following your rules, living a life you saw fit. The silence in the room was palpable. Andrew continued, his voice softer now. But Emma, she showed me that there's more to life than quarterly reports and business dinners. And our son, he's given me something that all the money in this company can't buy, a chance to have the family I've always wanted. That's very touching, Gregory interrupted dismissively. But it doesn't change the fact that your affair with a female employee could destroy everything we've built. First, Andrew turned to face him. Emma is not an affair. She's the woman I love and the mother of my child. Secondly, if our reputation is so fragile that it can be destroyed by me taking on my responsibilities as a man and a father, perhaps we need to reevaluate our values as a company. Richard chose that moment to intervene, standing up with a folder in his hands. If I may, I prepared some documents that may help us navigate this situation constructively. As Richard handed out the papers, Andrew noticed his mother studying the documents with increasing interest. Victoria had always had a special talent for spotting opportunities where others saw only problems. A restructuring? She asked, raising an eyebrow. More like a natural evolution, Richard explained. Harrison Enterprises has always prided itself on being a family business. Why not turn that into our strength? A narrative about family values, responsibility, and love can resonate very well with modern audiences. That's ridiculous, Gregory protested, but some other board members were already showing interest in the proposal. Actually, Catherine Whitman intervened. It could work. Our research shows that the new generation of consumers values authenticity and transparency in the brands they choose. The technical discussion that followed was interrupted by Andrew's cell phone. It was a text message from the hospital. His heart raced as he read the content. Emma had been successfully transferred to a regular room. Ladies and gentlemen, he called out to everyone, you have the documents you need to make a decision. You can remove me from office if you see fit, but I'm not giving up my family. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to be somewhere else. As he headed for the door, Victoria stood up. So? Andrew stopped, turning to face her. Your father would be proud, she said simply, surprising everyone in the room. He always said that a man who doesn't fight for what he believes in doesn't deserve to lead. His mother's words accompanied him all the way to the hospital, where he found Emma sitting on her new bed, with more color in her face and a genuine smile at the sight of him. How was the meeting? She asked, concern evident in her voice. Andrew sat down next to her, taking her hand between his. Let's just say that some traditions need to be broken so that others can begin. The hospital room had been transformed into a makeshift office over the last few hours. Andrew, sitting next to Emma's bed, alternated between answering urgent emails and watching her quiet breathing as she slept. The results of the board meeting were still reverberating in his mind when Richard quietly entered the room. I've got news, the lawyer whispered, signaling for them to meet in the hallway. Andrew adjusted Emma's blanket before following him. Catherine Whitman is on our side, Richard revealed as soon as they had closed the door. She's convinced 3 other board members that her restructuring proposal is not only viable, but necessary to modernize the company's image. Andrew leaned against the wall, processing the information. And Gregory? Still furious, obviously. But with Victoria openly supporting you, he's losing ground fast. A tired smile appeared on Andrew's face. I never thought I'd see my mother advocating such a radical change in the company. Speaking of her, Richard checked his phone. Victoria is organizing a press conference for tomorrow. She wants to personally announce the new chapter of Harrison Enterprises, as she's calling it. The conversation was interrupted by Dr. Chun, who approached with a clipboard in his hands. "Mr. Harrison, can I talk to you for a moment?" The doctor led him a few steps forward. "Ms. Collins' latest tests are excellent. If they continue, we can consider discharging her in 2 days." "So soon?" Andrew asked, concerned. "She'll need rest and regular monitoring, but yes, the recovery is progressing better than expected." Dr. Chen hesitated before continuing. "However, we need to discuss post-discharge arrangements. Does she live alone?" "Not for long," Andrew replied firmly. "I've already arranged for her to move in with me." Back in the bedroom, he found Emma awake, reaching for a glass of water on the side table. He quickly rushed over to help her. "I could hear part of the conversation," she admitted after taking a few sips. "Andrew, you don't have to take me to your house. I can manage on my own." "Emma," he sat on the edge of the bed, holding her hands. "I know it's all happening so fast, but please let me take care of you. Both of you." She bit her lip, a gesture he had learned to associate with her hesitation to accept help. "Your house is huge. I'll feel lost there. Then let's find somewhere else. Together." Andrew smiled, stroking her cheek. "Actually, I already have some ideas about that." Emma raised an eyebrow, curious. "What ideas?" "Remember that house in the back bay that you always admired when we passed it on the way to the office? The Victorian one with the garden?" Her eyes widened. "Andrew, that house must cost a fortune." "Actually," he smiled, "it's already ours. I signed the papers this morning." "You what?" Emma tried to sit up, wincing at the sudden movement. "Calm down," he helped her settle. "I know I should have talked to you first, but when I saw that you were available, it felt like a sign." Tears began to form in Emma's eyes. "You're really serious about all this, aren't you?" "I've never been so serious in my entire life." Andrew leaned over, kissing her softly. "The house needs some renovation, but we can turn it into exactly what we want." "Even," he smiled against her lips. "There's a room perfect for a nursery, overlooking the garden." The door opened, revealing Victoria Harrison carrying several designer bags. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything," she said, although her smile suggested she knew exactly what she was interrupting. "I brought you some clothing options for when you're discharged," Victoria continued, starting to take elegant pieces out of the bags. "And some decorating magazines. Andrew told me about the house in Back Bay." Emma cast a surprised glance at Andrew before turning to Victoria. "Mrs. Harrison, Victoria, you needn't have bothered." "Nonsense." Victoria dismissed the comment with a gesture. "Besides, we need to start planning the nursery. That house has wonderful potential, but it's going to need a good makeover before the baby arrives." Andrew watched in awe as his mother and Emma began leafing through magazines together, discussing colors and styles. It was a scene he had never imagined possible a few days ago. "Oh, I almost forgot," Victoria interrupted the discussion about shades of sage green. "Andrew, darling, I need you at the press conference tomorrow. We're going to present a united front." "Mom, I don't want to leave Emma alone. I'll stay with her," Victoria offered, surprising everyone. "We have a lot to plan, and you need to show those press vultures that the Harrisons are stronger when they're united." Emma squeezed Andrew's hand. "She's right. Just go. I'll be right here when you get back." That evening, after Victoria had finally left, laden with notes on renovating and decorating, Andrew and Emma were alone again. The room was silent except for the soft sound of the muted television on the wall. "Your mother is really trying hard," Emma commented, playing with Andrew's fingers entwined in hers. "She's amazing when she decides something's worth it," he replied, leaning over to kiss her forehead. "As I should have been from the start." "You're here now," Emma murmured sleepily. "That's what matters." Andrew watched her fall asleep, thinking about how his life had completely changed in a matter of days. The house in the Back Bay would only be the beginning. He had much bigger plans for his future with Emma and their son. But for now, he was perfectly content to be there, holding her hand while she slept, dreaming of the tomorrow they would build together. The press conference in the main lobby of Harrison Enterprises attracted a crowd of journalists. Andrew adjusted his tie as he watched his mother, Victoria, command the makeshift stage with the same elegance that characterized her in every situation. Harrison Enterprises has always been more than a technology company, Victoria declared into the microphone, her voice firm and controlled. We are a family, and families grow, evolve, and adapt. Backstage, Richard checked the latest messages on his cell phone. The market is reacting positively. The shares have already recovered 2 points since the start of the press conference. Andrew barely registered the information, his mind focused on Emma. He had left her at the hospital that morning, promising to return as soon as possible. Her last message was still flashing on his phone. I'm fine. Your mother brought enough catalogs to decorate 10 houses. And I'm delighted to announce significant changes to our corporate structure, Victoria continued. Changes that reflect our commitment to family values and social responsibility. The camera flashes intensified as Andrew took to the stage, joining his mother. The press buzz increased. Everyone wanted the first photo of the Harrison heir after the scandal. My son Andrew will not only continue as CEO, Victoria continued, surprising many with her next statement, but he will also lead our new modernization initiative, starting with more inclusive policies for employees and their families. Andrew approached the microphone, feeling the weight of hundreds of expectant stares. Harrison Enterprises was built on the principle that technology should serve people, not the other way around. Today, we reaffirm that commitment, starting with our own corporate family. The questions came like an avalanche. Mr. Harrison, is it true that your assistant is pregnant? How long did the relationship last? How is the Harrison family dealing with the situation? Emma Collins, Andrew replied with a calm that surprised even his mother, is an exemplary professional who has contributed significantly to the growth of this company over the last 3 years. Yes, we're expecting a child. And yes, I intend to take on all the responsibilities as a father and partner. At the hospital, Emma watched the live broadcast on her tablet, silent tears streaming down her face. Victoria had insisted on leaving a discreet security team in the corridor, anticipating the interest of the press. He's doing really well, commented Catherine Whitman, who had decided to keep Emma company during the press conference. I've never seen Andrew so sure of himself. Emma smiled, instinctively touching his still, barely visible belly. He's always been strong. He just needed to find something he really wanted to fight for. Back at the press conference, Andrew continued to answer questions with an honesty that disarmed even the most insistent reporters. When asked about the future, his answer was straightforward. I'm building a family with the woman I love. If that shocks some of our more conservative investors, maybe it's time for them to reevaluate their own values. Richard, watching from backstage, noticed Gregory Montgomery leaving the lobby in a rage. We've just lost another member of the council, he whispered to Victoria as she joined him. Let him go, Victoria replied, surprisingly calm. Sometimes we need to prune a few branches to make the tree grow stronger. After the press conference, Andrew dismissed his team and drove straight to the hospital. He found Emma asleep, the tablet still on her lap, showing the headlines about the press conference. Catherine had left a note informing him that she had to leave for a meeting. Hey, he whispered when she opened her eyes. How are you feeling? Proud, Emma replied, pulling him into a kiss, and a little scared of all the attention. Andrew settled into the chair next to the bed, entwining his fingers with hers. I know it's not easy to have your life exposed like this, but I promise I'll protect you and our son from any— Andrew, she interrupted him softly. I don't need to be protected. I need us to be in this together, as partners. He smiled, recognizing the strength he had always admired in her. Partners, he agreed. Speaking of which, I brought you something to look at. He took some architectural plans out of his jacket pocket. These are the first sketches for the renovation of the house. I thought we could go over them together. Emma settled down on the bed, curious. The next few hours were spent discussing structural changes, wall colors, and the transformation of the old office into a nursery. It was surreal how, in the midst of all the media chaos, that moment seemed so normal, so right. You know what's funny? Emma commented as they studied the master bedroom project. I spent so long trying to keep a professional distance, convincing myself that it was better this way, and now Now we're choosing curtains together? Andrew added with a smile. Exactly. She hesitated before continuing. Are you sure you won't regret it? Giving up so much for us? Andrew let go of the plants and held her face between his hands. Emma, I'm not giving up anything. I'm finally choosing what really matters. A soft knock on the door interrupted the moment. Dr. Chen entered, carrying the latest test results. Good news, he announced. If the next tests continue like this, you'll be able to go home tomorrow. So soon? Andrew asked, concerned. With adequate rest and regular monitoring, the doctor assured him. And I imagine she'll have all the support she needs at home? More than you can imagine, Emma replied, smiling at Andrew. More than I ever imagined. The day of her discharge from hospital arrived with a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Andrew had turned the master bedroom of his penthouse on Beacon Hill into a temporary sanctuary for Emma, while the house in the Back Bay underwent initial renovations. The security team, discreetly positioned at the entrance to the building, kept the photographers at bay. Are you sure you don't want to use the wheelchair? Dr. Chen asked for the third time, watching Emma finish dressing in a comfortable outfit that Victoria had personally chosen. I'm fine, doctor, Emma insisted, although Andrew noticed how she unconsciously rested her hand on her abdomen as she moved. I just want to go home. Home? The word carried a new meaning now. Andrew realized that, in all his years living alone in the penthouse, he had never really considered it a home. It was just a place to sleep between endless days at the office. Remember the restrictions? Dr. Chen continued, handing over a list of recommendations. Absolute rest for the first week, then light activities as tolerated. No work or unnecessary stress. I'll take care of that, Andrew assured her, tucking the list into his jacket pocket. I've already arranged to work from home for the next few weeks. Emma looked at him in surprise. Andrew, you don't have to. I want to be there, he interrupted her gently. Richard can handle the office, and most of the meetings can be done by video conference. The journey to the car was a meticulously planned operation. Richard had ensured that the back exit of the hospital was clear of reporters, and 2 security guards escorted the couple to the Range Rover that was waiting for them. Your mother called 3 times this morning, Emma commented as Andrew maneuvered the car out of the parking lot. She wants to show us some wallpaper samples for the nursery. Andrew smiled, still marveling at his mother's transformation. Victoria Harrison, an expert in children's decoration. Who knew? I think she's trying to make up for lost time, Emma reflected, watching the city pass by the window. Yesterday she told me about when she was pregnant with you. How your father renovated the baby's room all by himself, insisting that it was a job for a father to do. Andrew was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. His mother rarely talked about his father, especially about intimate moments like this. Arriving at the building, they found Catherine Whitman waiting in the lobby. I thought I'd welcome you personally, she smiled, handing Emma a bouquet of white lilies. And we also need to discuss some details about the new employee benefits program. Catherine, Andrew started to protest, but Emma interrupted him. That's fine. In fact, I have a few suggestions about that. She accepted Andrew's offered arm as they walked to the elevator. I think we can use our experience to create something really meaningful. In the apartment, Emma was momentarily speechless. Andrew had transformed the traditionally minimalist space into something welcoming. Soft cushions on the sofa, fresh flowers on the tables, and a cashmere blanket carefully folded over a new recliner. Richard helped me with the shopping, he admitted, noticing her surprised look. Apparently, I have terrible taste in decoration. Catherine observed the interaction with a knowing smile. Well, I'll let you settle in. Emma, when you're ready, we can set up a video conference to discuss those ideas. After Catherine left, Andrew led Emma to the master bedroom, where a king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets awaited them. You need to rest, he insisted gently. Only if you stay with me, Emma asked, taking his hand. We still haven't talked about how you're coping with all this. Andrew sat down next to her on the bed, allowing himself to relax for the first time in days. Honestly, I'm terrified, he admitted. Not of what other people think, or of what might happen to the company. I'm scared that I won't be good enough for both of you. Emma snuggled closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder. Do you know what I admire most about you? Your ability to face your fears head on. I'll learn from the best, he smiled, kissing her forehead. You've always been the brave one out of the two of us. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. Andrew worked on his laptop while Emma slept, occasionally waking up to share a light snack or take calls from Victoria about urgent decorating decisions. In the early evening, as they shared a homemade soup that the housekeeper had prepared, Emma finally verbalized something she had been thinking. I want to help with the new benefits program, she said. Not as your assistant or whatever I am now, but as someone who understands the challenges employees face. Andrew put down his spoon, studying her intently. You'll always be more than any title, Emma, and I think your ideas are exactly what the company needs. Even if it means more changes to the board, especially if it means more changes, he smiled. Besides, Catherine is already putting together a team dedicated to this. She'd be happy to have you lead the project when she's ready, of course. Emma nodded, feeling more energized than she had in days. We can start with more inclusive parental leave policies and maybe a corporate daycare program. See, Andrew leaned in to kiss her. That's why I need you, not just at home, but also in business. You always see beyond the obvious. The sound of the intercom interrupted the moment. It was Victoria, carrying folders with fabric samples and catalogs of children's furniture. I hope I'm not in the way, she said as she entered, although her tone suggested she knew exactly what she was doing. But we need to decide on the nursery theme before the designer starts work on the new house. Emma and Andrew exchanged amused glances. Apparently, the evening would be dedicated to discussing the relative merits of different shades of sage green and wallpaper patterns. Emma's first week in Andrew's penthouse established a new routine for the couple. Mornings began with breakfast served on the balcony overlooking the Charles River, where they discussed the new house's renovation projects between work calls and frequent visits from Victoria with new decorating samples. The workmen start demolishing the old kitchen today, Andrew commented as he poured Emma more orange juice. The architect said they found some original elements of the house that we can restore. Emma smiled, watching him organize documents on his laptop without taking her eyes off him. Over the last few nights, she had noticed how he checked his breathing in his sleep, still haunted by his days in hospital. You need to stop watching me sleep, she said softly. I'm not going to disappear, you know. Andrew paused his work, meeting her eyes. I'm sorry. It's just he hesitated. That call from the hospital? I still wake up sometimes thinking it was all a bad dream. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Catherine Whitman, carrying a thick folder with proposals for the new corporate benefits program. I hope I'm not disturbing breakfast, she smiled, noticing the partially empty plates. But we need to finalize this before the board meeting tomorrow. Emma settled into her chair, instantly more alert. Despite doctor's orders to avoid work, she couldn't keep completely away, especially from such a significant project. Actually, Andrew interjected, I was thinking of postponing the meeting. Emma still needs rest, and Emma interrupted him gently. I can attend by video. It's important. Catherine watched the interaction with interest. It was clear how the dynamic between them had changed since the accident. The former professional relationship had evolved into something deeper, a genuine partnership where they both cared about and respected each other's limitations. I've got some news about Gregory, Catherine commented as she settled down. He's trying to form an alliance with some smaller investors against the proposed changes. Andrew sighed, running a hand through his hair in a familiar gesture of frustration. Predictable. He's never been okay with not having full control over the board's decisions. Actually, Emma intervened, leafing through some documents Catherine had brought. This could be an opportunity. If we show how the new policies can increase productivity and talent retention. Just what I thought, Catherine smiled. That's why I brought some case studies of companies that have implemented similar programs. The next few hours were spent refining the presentation for the board. Emma contributed valuable insights based on her experience as an employee, while Andrew and Catherine focused on the financial and logistical aspects. We need a name for the program, Catherine commented, organizing the last notes. Something that reflects the company's new values. How about Harrison Forward? Emma suggested. It represents progress, but maintains the connection with family tradition. Andrew looked at her with admiration. Perfect, as always. The rest of the morning passed quickly between phone calls and final adjustments to the documents. When Catherine finally left, Emma noticed Andrew watching her with concern. "I'm fine," she assured him, recognizing the signs. "Just a bit tired. Let's get some rest," he suggested, helping her to her feet. "Richard can deal with the rest of the preparations for tomorrow." In the bedroom, as Emma settled between the cushions, Andrew received a message from his mother. Victoria had found a set of vintage furniture for the nursery that would go perfectly with the style of the house in the back bay. "Your mom is really into this renovation," Emma commented, reading the message over his shoulder. "I never imagined she'd be so involved." "I think you've given her something she hasn't had for a long time," Andrew replied, lying down next to her. "A purpose beyond social events and council meetings." Emma reflected on how things had changed. Just a few weeks ago, Victoria Harrison was an intimidating figure who barely noticed her existence beyond direct work-related orders. Now, they spent hours discussing wall colors and baby furniture. "Speaking of purpose," she began hesitantly, "I've been thinking about my role in the company after the baby is born." Andrew propped himself up on one elbow to get a better look at her. "You can do whatever you want. You know that, right?" "I know, but I want to do something meaningful. Something that really makes a difference to people's lives." She paused, organizing her thoughts. Maybe turn Harrison forward into something bigger than just corporate benefits. A complete family support program, with daycare, expanded medical care, psychological support. "Keep going," Andrew encouraged, recognizing the familiar gleam in her eyes when she had an idea she was passionate about. "We could create a model that other companies could follow. Show that it's possible to be successful in business without sacrificing the well-being of employees." The board meeting started virtually at 9 in the morning, with Emma joining in from the comfort of the penthouse while Andrew and Catherine led the Harrison Forward presentation from the main conference room. The split screen showed the faces of all the members, including a visibly upset Gregory Montgomery. "The numbers are clear," Catherine presented, her firm voice echoing through the room. "Companies that have implemented similar programs have seen an average 47% increase in talent retention and a 32% reduction in turnover costs." Emma watched the reactions carefully through the screen. Years of experience in executive meetings having trained her to read the nuances in the participants' expressions. Gregory alternated between making angry notes and casting disapproving glances at Andrew. "And who exactly is going to lead this initiative?" Gregory interrupted, barely disguising his disdain. "We need someone with proven experience in human resources management, not just good intentions." "Emma Collins," Andrew replied without hesitation, his eyes meeting hers through the screen. "No one knows the needs of our employees better or has more experience in coordinating complex projects at Harrison." A murmur ran through the virtual room. Emma felt her heart race, not at the mention of her name, but at the absolute confidence in Andrew's voice. "With all due respect," Gregory continued, his tone indicating the exact opposite, "Ms. Collins is not in a position to take on Harrison. Collins is in no position to take on such a responsibility considering her current situation." "My current situation," Emma interjected, her voice calm but firm, "is exactly what qualifies me for this role, Mr. Montgomery. I experience firsthand the challenges our employees face when trying to balance professional and personal lives." Victoria, who had remained silent until then, leaned forward in her chair. "I agree with Emma. What's more, your previous experience managing international projects for the company proves your leadership skills." Victoria's unexpected support momentarily silenced the objections. Catherine took the opportunity to present the implementation schedule, highlighting how the program would be developed in phases to minimize operational impacts. As the presentation continued, Emma received a private message from Richard. "Gregory is furious because he's lost control of the narrative." Stand your ground. The discussion went on for another 2 hours, with every aspect of the program being thoroughly analyzed. Emma remained engaged, answering questions and offering insights that demonstrated her deep understanding of both the practical and strategic aspects of the project. "Before we close," Gregory made one last attempt. "I'd like to register my concern about the initial costs of this program. In times of economic uncertainty, the costs have already been fully calculated and projected." Andrew interrupted him, his patience visibly wearing thin. As shown in the reports you've all received, the return on investment is projected for the first 18 months. What's more, Emma added, we already have 3 partner companies interested in implementing similar programs, which positions us as leaders in corporate social innovation. The final vote was surprisingly favorable. 8 votes in favor, 3 against, with 1 abstention. Gregory disconnected immediately after the result, but not before Emma noticed his look of pure resentment. After the meeting, as Andrew drove home, Emma received an unexpected call from Catherine. You were brilliant, Catherine praised. Gregory didn't expect so much preparation and technical knowledge. He clearly underestimated you. Thank you, Catherine, but something tells me he won't give up easily. Probably not, but now he knows he's not just dealing with the CEO's pregnant assistant. You proved your worth today. When Andrew arrived home, he found Emma on the balcony, lost in thought as she watched the movement on the river. Penny for your thoughts? He joked, taking a seat next to her. I was thinking about how things have changed, she replied, leaning back against him. A few weeks ago, I was just your assistant trying to hide a pregnancy. Now I'm leading a project that could change the lives of hundreds of families. Andrew kissed her temple softly. You were never just my assistant, Emma. You've always been so much more. Gregory will continue to be a problem, she commented after a moment's silence. Probably, but I won't let him or anyone else interfere with what we're building, whether in the company or in our personal lives. Emma smiled, remembering something. Your mother surprised me today. I didn't expect her to defend me so openly. Victoria Harrison always recognizes talent when she sees it, Andrew replied. Besides, I think she's finally understood that you're not here for the Harrison name or money. The rest of the afternoon was spent finalizing details of the project with the HR team, interspersed with virtual tours of the progress of the renovation in the new house. Emma noticed how Andrew constantly checked that she wasn't overworking herself, his protective instinct still sharp after the accident. Do you know what impressed me the most today? She commented as they shared dinner later. How you didn't hesitate to stand up for me, even though you knew it could create more conflict on the council. Emma, Andrew put down his cutlery, looking at her intensely. I've learned the hard way that some things are more important than corporate politics. You and our son are my priority now. The rest, we can deal with that together. Saturday morning brought a different atmosphere to the penthouse. Emma woke up to the sound of muffled voices coming from the kitchen. Andrew and Victoria discussing the last details of the renovation while preparing breakfast. The domestic scene, so far removed from the formality that used to characterize the Harrisons, still surprised her. The demolition team found original oak paneling behind the library walls, Victoria explained, gesturing with a coffee cup. We can restore them and incorporate them into the new design. Emma watched from the kitchen doorway, not immediately announcing her presence. Andrew was concentrating on making pancakes, a skill she'd only recently discovered he possessed, while his mother showed him photos on her iPad. Good morning, she finally said, making them both turn around. You should be resting. Andrew immediately put down the spatula, moving to help her sit up. I'm pregnant, not disabled. Emma joked but accepted his support. The pain from the accident had eased considerably, but she still felt occasional twinges when she moved too quickly. Actually, Victoria intervened. It's good that you're here. We need to discuss next week's charity dinner. Andrew frowned. Mom, Emma still needs rest. I don't think a social event is appropriate right now. Actually, Emma surprised them both. I think we should go. It would be a great opportunity to officially present Harrison forward to our main partners. Victoria smiled triumphantly. Just what I thought. Besides, she hesitated briefly, it will be your first official public appearance as a couple. We need to control the narrative before the press create their own stories. Andrew's phone vibrated. It was Richard with updates on Gregory Montgomery. Apparently, he was trying to arrange private meetings with some important investors. Let him try, Victoria said when Andrew shared the information. The more he tries to undermine you, the more desperate he seems. Emma observed the interaction between mother and son, noticing how their dynamic had changed. Where once there had been tension and unmet expectations, now there was a deeper mutual understanding. About dinner, Victoria continued. I've already arranged an appropriate dress for you, Emma. Something elegant but comfortable. considering your condition." "Mother," Andrew started to protest, but Emma interrupted him with a gentle touch on his arm. "Thank you, Victoria. I'm sure it will be perfect." The morning progressed with discussions about the event and virtual tours of the house renovation. The architect sent new photos showing progress on the library and the future nursery. "The original structure is impressive," the architect explained via video call. "With a few modern adaptations, we can create a truly unique space." After lunch, while Victoria attended a meeting of the charity committee by phone, Andrew found Emma on the balcony, lost in thought. "A penny for your thoughts?" he asked, taking a seat next to her. "I was thinking about how quickly everything has changed," she replied, entwining her fingers with his. "A few weeks ago, I could barely look your mother in the eye. Now she's picking out my dress for social events." Andrew laughed softly. Victoria Harrison has always been a force of nature. When she decides to support something, she does it with all her energy. "Like it," Emma teased. "Maybe it's genetic," he admitted, leaning in to kiss her softly. The moment was interrupted by a phone call from Catherine. The news was worrying. Gregory had managed to arrange a meeting with the Blackstones, one of Harrison Enterprises' biggest investors. "Don't worry about that now," Andrew insisted when he saw the concern on Emma's face. "Richard and Catherine are monitoring the situation. But what if he manages to convince them? The Blackstones have enough clout to—" "Emma," Andrew interrupted her gently, "we've built something solid here. Not just our relationship, but Harrison Forward as well. Gregory can try all he likes, but he won't destroy." Victoria, who had finished her call, joined them on the balcony. The dinner invitations have been sent out. The list of confirmations is already impressive. "Who's confirmed?" Emma asked, trying to keep the anxiety out of her voice. "The Palmers, the Richardsons, and yes," Victoria smiled with satisfaction, "the Blackstones." Andrew looked at his mother with new admiration. "You planned that?" "Of course I did, darling. Why let Gregory have a private meeting when we can present our vision first, in a controlled environment?" Emma couldn't help but smile. Victoria Harrison was proving to be a much more valuable ally than she had ever imagined. "Now," Victoria continued, consulting her iPad, "we need to discuss the menu. Chef Jacques has suggested some options that would perfectly complement the evening's theme." As Victoria detailed the culinary choices, Emma felt the baby move, a gentle movement that still surprised her every time. Andrew, noticing her expression, placed his hand on her belly, sharing the intimate moment even under his mother's watchful eye. Victoria watched the scene with a soft smile, remembering similar moments with her late husband. Perhaps, she thought, some traditions were worth keeping, while others needed to evolve over time. The ballroom of the Four Seasons Boston glowed with understated elegance on the night of the charity dinner. Emma adjusted the emerald green dress Victoria had chosen, a flowing model that disguised her pregnancy without hiding it completely. Andrew, impeccable in his tuxedo, kept a protective hand on her back as they greeted the guests. "The Blackstones have just arrived," Richard whispered, approaching discreetly. "Gregory is with them." Emma felt Andrew tense slightly beside her, but his expression remained serene. Victoria, who was conducting an animated conversation with a couple of investors nearby, cast a meaningful glance in her direction. "Mr. Blackstone," Andrew greeted with a controlled smile as the couple approached. "It's a pleasure to have you with us this evening." Margaret Blackstone, an elegant woman in her 60s, immediately focused her attention on Emma. "So this is the young woman who is revolutionizing Harrison Enterprises? Gregory has told us a lot about you." "I'm sure he has," Emma replied with a genuine smile, recognizing the glint of genuine interest in the lady's eyes. "I hope we could discuss the details of Harrison Forward in person over dinner." Gregory, who was observing the interaction with barely disguised irritation, tried to intervene. "Margaret, those figures we discussed, they can wait," she interrupted him gently. "Tonight is about celebrating positive change, isn't it?" The dinner went with the precision of a well-rehearsed ballet. Victoria had arranged the table strategically, ensuring that the Blackstones were close enough to Emma and Andrew for meaningful conversation, but far enough away from Gregory to avoid his interference. During the second course, Margaret leaned towards Emma. "You know, dear, I had a pregnant assistant once many years ago. When she had to choose between work and family, We lost a brilliant employee. That's exactly the kind of choice we want to eliminate, Emma replied, feeling more confident. Harrison Forward isn't just about benefits. It's about creating a corporate culture that values people fully. What about the costs? Robert Blackstone, who had remained silent until then, asked. They're an investment, Andrew interjected. The figures show that companies with strong family policies have lower turnover, higher productivity, and a better reputation in the market. Dessert was being served when Victoria took to the small stage for her speech. Emma noticed how the Harrison matriarch naturally commanded the attention of the room. Harrison Enterprises has always prided itself on being a family business, Victoria began. Today, we are expanding the meaning of that word. Family isn't just about blood ties. It's about taking care of each other, about creating an environment where everyone can thrive. As Victoria continued, Emma felt the baby move. Andrew, noticing her sudden change in posture, held her hand under the table. The intimate moment did not go unnoticed by Margaret Blackstone. After the speech, during the soft music that would precede the dances, Margaret asked for a private moment with Emma. Gregory came to see us with a very different story, she revealed, leading Emma to a quieter corner of the ballroom. He talked about scandals, about rash decisions based on emotions. And what do you think? Emma asked directly. I think I saw something tonight that Gregory can't see. Margaret smiled. I saw a company evolving naturally, led by people who understand that success in business and humanity are not mutually exclusive. Before Emma could reply, Andrew joined them. Is everything all right? He asked, his concern evident. Perfectly fine, Margaret assured him. I was just telling your lovely companion that the Blackstones fully support Harrison Forward. In fact, she added with a conspiratorial smile, we'd like to implement a similar program in our companies. Across the room, Gregory watched the scene with growing discomfort. Victoria, who was discreetly monitoring the situation, approached him. You know, Gregory, she commented casually, I always thought you were smarter than that. What are you talking about, Victoria? About knowing how to recognize when a battle is lost, she replied, her smile as sharp as a blade. The world is changing. You can change with it or, he challenged. Or you can find your place in another company that shares your old-fashioned values. The rest of the evening flowed like fine wine, with Emma and Andrew receiving congratulations and expressions of support from various guests. When they finally got into the car to drive home, Emma kicked off her shoes with a sigh of relief. You were amazing, Andrew said softly, pulling her close. We were amazing, she corrected. All of us, your mother especially. I never imagined that she would become our biggest advocate. Victoria Harrison always plays to win, he smiled, and she clearly chose our team. The first rays of March sunshine illuminated the interior of the Back Bay house as Emma and Andrew made their first official visit to the almost completed renovation. The scent of fresh paint mingled with the newly polished wood of the restored library panels, creating an atmosphere of new beginnings. The craftsmen did an incredible job with the original details, Andrew commented, carefully guiding Emma through the rooms. His hand remained protectively on her back as they climbed the main staircase, now restored to its Victorian splendor. Emma stopped at the top of the stairs, admiring the corridor that led to the nursery. Victoria had personally overseen every detail of the room, transforming it into a space that blended classical elements with modern touches. I still can't believe we'll be living here in a few weeks, she murmured, unconsciously stroking her increasingly visible belly. Gentlemen, the architect met them in the hallway, carrying updated plans. The last of the kitchen finishes will be installed this week, and the accessibility modifications you requested for the garden are almost complete. After the success of the charity dinner, the weeks had passed in a whirlwind of activity. Harrison Forward was in full swing, with Emma coordinating virtual meetings from her temporary rooftop workstation. Gregory Montgomery had surprisingly resigned from the council, citing irreconcilable differences of view. The nursery furniture arrives tomorrow, Victoria announced, climbing the stairs to join them. And I brought some final fabric samples for the curtains in the master suite. Andrew watched his mother and Emma poring over fabric samples, discussing patterns and textures. The transformation in their relationship still surprised him sometimes. Mr. Harrison? Richard appeared discreetly at his side. We have that meeting with the international investors in half an hour. Can you reschedule? Andrew asked, his eyes still fixed on Emma. I want to take advantage of this moment. Richard smiled understandingly. I've already rescheduled for tomorrow. I thought you might like to stay. The sound of laughter caught their attention. Emma and Victoria had found an old, dusty photo behind one of the panels during the renovation. In it, a young Andrew was smiling, holding a school debating trophy. You were adorable with braces, Emma teased, showing the photo. I still have some boxes from the attic to go through, Victoria commented. I'm sure we'll find more treasures to share. The morning progressed with final decisions on finishes in planning the move. Emma occasionally stopped to rest, still following her doctor's recommendations. But her energy for the project was infectious. I thought about using this space as a shared office, she suggested, showing a sunny room on the second floor. That way we can work from home when we need to, but still maintain a healthy separation between work and personal life. Andrew hugged her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder, always thinking about balance. Someone has to, she joked, leaning back against him. Otherwise, you'd turn every room into a meeting room. Victoria, observing the interaction, smiled discreetly. I'll check on progress in the kitchen. The new appliances should be here soon. Alone in the future office, Emma and Andrew allowed themselves a moment of quiet. The distant sound of hammers and chainsaws created a strange background music for their thoughts. Sometimes I still wonder if all this is real, Emma confessed, turning to face him. If I'm going to wake up back in that hospital, or worse, in my old apartment alone. Andrew held her face between his hands. It's real. Every moment, every decision that brought us here. And I promise you'll never be alone again. A noise in the corridor interrupted them. Catherine had arrived for an update meeting on Harrison Forward. Sorry to interrupt, she smiled, noting the intimate moment. But I have some exciting news about the corporate daycare program. The three of them settled into temporary chairs as Catherine shared the latest updates. The pilot project would be implemented at Harrison's Boston headquarters, with plans to expand to other offices in the coming months. The employees are enthusiastic, Catherine reported. Applications for the program have already exceeded our initial expectations. What about the costs? Emma asked, always attentive to financial details. Within budget. In fact, the Blackstone suggested a partnership to expand the program more quickly. Andrew watched Emma in her element, asking insightful questions and suggesting adjustments to the implementation plan. She had blossomed in her new role, turning her personal experience into tangible change for others. Oh, one more thing, Catherine added before leaving. Forbes magazine wants to do a story on the program. They're particularly interested in the story behind it. Emma hesitated. I don't know if I'm ready for so much exposure. You're more than ready, Andrew assured her. Your story could inspire other companies to follow our example. Victoria, returning from inspecting the kitchen, added her support. Besides, who better to tell this story than someone who has lived it? The interview for Forbes was scheduled for a sunny April afternoon in their new Back Bay home. Emma nervously adjusted her loose blouse over her 6-month belly while the journalist, Madison Carter, set up her recording equipment in the restored library. It's an impressive house, Madison commented, admiring the oak paneling that gleamed in the natural light. It matches perfectly with the story we're about to tell. Tradition meeting modernity. Andrew, who was discreetly supervising the installation of the last bookcases, smiled as he noticed Emma's nervousness. In recent weeks, she had conducted countless meetings about Harrison Forward, but a personal interview was uncharted territory. Can we start by talking about how it all began? Madison suggested, settling into one of the leather armchairs. The moment you realized that Harrison Enterprises needed this change, Emma exchanged a meaningful glance with Andrew before answering. Actually, it started with an accident, she said softly. Sometimes it takes almost losing something to realize its true value. The conversation flowed naturally as Emma shared her experience. First as an executive assistant, then as a pregnant employee trying to navigate the complexities of the corporate environment, and finally as the architect of a program that was redefining corporate policies. The numbers are impressive, Madison noted, consulting her notes. 15 companies have already shown interest in implementing similar programs. How do you see this impact expanding? It's like planting a garden, Emma replied, looking through the French windows at the green space being transformed at the back of the house. You start with a seed, in this case, the idea that professional success in personal life can coexist harmoniously. With the right care, that seed grows and inspires others to plant their own gardens. Victoria arrived during the interview, bringing finished designs for the sensory garden she was planning, a side project that had become her passion in recent weeks. "My mother has discovered a new vocation," Andrew commented humorously as Victoria unfurled the plants on the antique table. "From ruthless executive to therapeutic garden specialist. People change," Victoria replied serenely. "Sometimes we just need the right motivation." Her affectionate glance towards Emma's belly didn't go unnoticed by the journalist. Madison was particularly interested in the transformation of the family dynamic. "Mrs. Harrison, what was it like for you to accept such significant changes in the company your husband built?" Victoria paused, carefully considering her answer. "My late husband used to say that a company is like a tree. It needs strong roots, but it also needs to grow towards the light. Emma and Andrew helped me see that sometimes light comes from unexpected directions." The interview continued as Catherine arrived with the latest program statistics. The implementation of the corporate creche was progressing ahead of schedule, and employee satisfaction ratings had reached record levels. "The most rewarding thing," Emma explained, "is receiving messages from employees sharing how the program has changed their lives. One junior analyst told me that she was finally able to accept a promotion because she now has the support to balance work and family." "What about you?" Madison asked, noticing how Andrew unconsciously moved closer to Emma. "How do you balance your own lives with all these changes?" "We learn together," Andrew replied, his hand finding Emma's. "Every day brings new challenges, but also new discoveries." The conversation was briefly interrupted by Richard's arrival with urgent news. The latest report showed a significant increase in the value of the company's shares since the announcement of the program. "The market is responding positively to our new direction," he explained, handing the documents to Andrew. "Apparently, social responsibility is an excellent investment." As the team discussed the figures, Emma felt her baby move vigorously. Madison, noticing her expression, turned off the recorder for a moment. "Can I ask you a question off the record?" she asked gently. "What's it like to be at the center of it all, while preparing to be a mother?" Emma smiled, appreciating the sincerity of the question. "It's scary and wonderful at the same time. But I guess that's how all big changes happen, with a mixture of fear and hope." In the late afternoon, as the sun painted golden shadows through the restored stained glass windows, Madison made her last notes. The story she planned to tell wasn't just about a company embracing change or an innovative benefits program. It was about how love could transform seemingly immutable structures. "We still have a lot of work to do," Emma reflected as they said goodbye to the journalist. "But for the first time, I feel like we're building something that goes beyond ourselves." Andrew hugged her from behind, both of them watching the garden through the library window. Workers were installing the last elements of Victoria's sensory space, a project that perfectly symbolized how tradition and innovation could coexist harmoniously. "You've transformed not just the company," he whispered in her ear, "but all of us." Autumn arrived in Boston with an explosion of color, transforming the sensory garden of the Back Bay house into a vivid canvas of reds and golds. Emma, now in her 8th month of pregnancy, watched from the library window as Victoria oversaw the final adjustments to the space that had become her personal project. The Forbes article had been published the week before, generating a wave of national interest in Harrison Ford. The phone kept ringing with requests for interviews and consultancies, but Emma kept her focus divided between the program and the preparations for the baby's arrival. "The nursery furniture has finally arrived," Andrew announced, entering the library with a cup of chamomile tea, the only drink that still calmed Emma's occasional nausea. "Do you want to come up and see?" Emma accepted his outstretched hand, smiling as she noticed how he still treated her as if she were made of crystal. Together, they climbed the restored staircase to the room they had spent months planning. The nursery was a masterpiece of design that blended vintage elements with modern touches. The mahogany cradle, An antique piece that Victoria had discovered in an antique shop and had restored, contrasted perfectly with the ergonomic breastfeeding armchair. The walls boasted a delicate mural of trees and birds, hand-painted by a local artist. "It's perfect," Emma whispered, thrilled. Her hands naturally found her prominent belly, where their son, they had decided to keep the sex a surprise, was actively moving around. The moment was interrupted by Catherine, who appeared in the doorway with an excited expression. "Sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this." In a shared office downstairs, Richard was already waiting with his laptop open. The Department of Labor just released a report citing Harrison Forward as a model for corporate family policy, he announced. "We're officially setting a new national standard." Andrew hugged Emma from behind, both of them reading the impressive statistics on the screen. The program had not only surpassed all initial projections, but was inspiring a cultural shift throughout the corporate sector. "This deserves a celebration," Victoria declared, entering with a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne. "By the way, the Blackstone's called. They want to expand our partnership to include an investment fund focused on companies with progressive family policies." As the team discussed the details of the new opportunity, Emma felt a sudden contraction. It wasn't the first time in recent weeks, but something felt different. "Andrew," she called softly, interrupting her conversation with Richard about financial projections. A puddle of water formed at her feet. The reaction was immediate. Victoria was already on the phone to the hospital, while Catherine coordinated logistics with the security team to avoid any unwanted press attention. Andrew, surprisingly calm, guided Emma to the car, remembering to pick up the suitcase carefully prepared weeks before. At the hospital, Dr. Chen was waiting for them with a reassuring smile. "Looks like someone decided to join the celebration a little early," she commented, ushering Emma into a private birthing suite. The next few hours unfolded in a blur of contractions, controlled breaths, and words of encouragement. Andrew didn't leave Emma's side for a moment, his constant presence anchoring her through the waves of pain. Victoria was waiting in the corridor with Richard and Catherine, all wrapped up in a strange mixture of work and anticipation. The Harrison matriarch occasionally entered the room to offer words of comfort, her own experience of motherhood creating a new bridge of connection with Emma. Finally, at 3:47 in the morning, a baby's loud cry filled the room. "It's a girl," Dr. Chen announced, placing the little pink bundle on Emma's chest. "Grace," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her daughter for the first time. "Gracias, Victoria Harrison." Andrew, also crying openly, kissed Emma's forehead before leaning down to gently touch his daughter's perfect little face. "It's the perfect name," he agreed. When Victoria walked in a few minutes later and heard the name chosen, her usual composure wavered momentarily. Wordlessly, she just held Emma's hand, a gesture that communicated more than any speech could. In the hours that followed, while Emma rested and Grace got to know her extended family, Andrew watched the sun rise over Boston from the hospital window. The city was waking up to another day, unaware of the small revolution that had begun in a hospital room months ago and was now culminating in the birth, not only of his daughter, but of a new era at Harrison Enterprises. Richard found his friend gazing at the view, thinking about how everything has changed, thinking about how some changes are exactly what we needed, even when we didn't know we needed them, Andrew replied, his gaze returning to Emma, asleep with Grace in her arms. In the days that followed, the news of Grace's birth was met with a wave of congratulations not only from social and business circles, but also from the employees of Harrison Enterprises. Each message reinforced how Harrison Forward had transformed not just corporate policies, but real lives. The drive home was quiet and private, just as the couple wanted. Victoria's sensory garden was in full bloom, as if celebrating the arrival of its new resident. In the nursery, soft evening light filtered through the silk curtains, creating dancing patterns on the walls as Emma breastfed Grace for the first time at home. "Welcome home, little revolutionary," Andrew whispered, watching his two greatest achievements with infinite love. The future that was unfolding in front of them was bright with possibilities, built on foundations of love, courage, and the determination to make a difference.